Hello and welcome to The Swing. At a very special episode today, 12 p.m. Eastern Time, this Saturday, May the 22nd, as we are finally here after a long season full of just randomness, play-ins that were absolutely wild, with the apex of that last night as Morant and his Memphis Grizzlies pulled off an absolute masterstroke, a masterful performance by Ja himself to go ahead and get his boys in as the 9th seed and able to go ahead and get it through. And they unfortunately come in at the expense of Stephen Curry and his Golden State Warriors, which obviously there's certain sadness to that because everyone wants to see more Steph, and this entire year he's been absolutely insane. But the fact of the matter is, on the day, there was just too much carelessness, just not enough support being given, while Ja and his boys really showed up and really showed out to get them into the playoffs. What does that mean, though? It means that the playoff bracket is now officially set. 8 teams from both the East and the West, respectively, are now going to do battle starting today at 2 p.m. Eastern Time when the playoffs kick off with the Eastern Conference side of things. So we're going to get to see all the teams on the East go ahead and take their first shots towards their eventual glory, as far as they're hoping. But as what it means for the Swing podcast viewers is that we're going to get this opportunity to go through our brackets, to go through what we get to see and what we think will happen in the most unpredictable of playoffs. Teams are not seated where you may have potentially expected them to be, which means that you might be getting some big matchups happening earlier in the playoff than you might have otherwise expected. And that means that some team is going to go home earlier than they may have otherwise expected. But before all of that, as always, the Swing Podcast is proudly sponsored by Thrive Fantasy. For those who don't know, definitely log on to thrivefantasy.com where you can play on the daily fantasy props with different sports applications and with different sports in general. But the focus being on the NBA, it's very simple. Once these playoffs get going, you join up contests on a daily basis and just pick the over-under on different statistical measures that are there for the different players within that tournament itself. And if you happen to be in one of the top lineups of the night, you will win legitimate money, and there are big cash prizes to be won. And as always, being a loyal listener of the Swing Podcast, if you join on using the promo code SWING, SWING, you will be rewarded with a 100% match of your deposit up to your first $50. So definitely get online, make your picks, and win money with the Swing Podcast and with Thrive Fantasy. Sign up and prop up today. Well, that guy Owais, it says special episode here. You look like you're absolutely ready to go. Guns are blazing. Guns are out. We get to go and start with the Eastern Conference. But before we get into nitty-gritty matchups, just tell me a little bit about how you're feeling about this playoffs. What did you think about that play-in game last night?
Yeah, well, here's what happened. Golden State had this incredible performance. Well, a game of 3 quarters, okay, where I felt like they played really solid. And then in I think the third quarter, something like that, they just started turning the ball over, and that's all the Lakers needed. And I felt like if the Golden State Warriors beat the LA Lakers, which I thought they actually had a really good chance of doing, I thought that's what the result would be. And then LeBron hit that shot with the dramatics and everything like that, and here we are. Lakers are in the playoffs. Then I said if they lose to the Lakers, there's no shot that Golden State beats Memphis, just because you did say, Jaren Jackson came back. You also have the size of Jonas Valanciunas that is absolutely unguardable for most teams. Then you have, Dylan Brooks, who is playing out of his mind. Just the last game of the season, we forget that Dylan Brooks, as inconsistent as he has been in the past, one thing you can rely on is the fact that he'll bring it every single day. He almost shut down Curry that last season game to solidify the win. He just got fouled out That was the problem. Otherwise, Golden State probably wouldn't have won that game. Then we talk about how Dylan Brooks extended the same type of energy against the Spurs. And unfortunately for, Curry fans, I know my good friend Massey was just destroyed yesterday, his entire morale. He wanted to see Curry make it to the playoffs. I think a lot of us did. I think that was a story we wanted for this season. But unfortunately, that's just not how it works in basketball. And they got outsized. John Morant played a clinic. Very tough guard for the Golden State Warriors. I don't know who could. Curry could not keep up with him. And that just ended up being the Achilles heel to some degree. And that's how I feel about that. All the teams, like we mentioned over and over again, every team that has made it to the playoffs has deserved to be there, right? So, it's just an exciting time. And now, 2 p.m. is the first game. We're really excited to get going. But, let's talk about brackets, because I guess the number one thing. When it comes to brackets, there's practicality. There's different types of people. There's the practical people who are like, okay, this is the better team. I'm going to choose them. And then there's people like me who go based off of just energy. I'm like, okay, eye test. I've seen this. What do we see here that I know what should happen, but what should happen doesn't necessarily always translate into the playoffs.
Fair.
That's what we love about the playoffs. So let's get right into it, man. I don't know if you have your screen with kind of your picks. We have our challenge. And I guess we can do another challenge. The first time I had to go bald, which was, no, that was not it. The first time I had to take the ice bucket challenge.
Yep.
That's what happened. And you had to shave.
Yep.
And you look like an absolute baby butt. So not the best looking thing I've ever seen, if I would say so myself. Fair. But anyway, let's have a challenge. So again, fans, if you guys want to comment, DM us on that guy. On the Swing podcast, or you could DM HK or myself on Instagram and let us know what you think we should do for this year's playoff challenge.
Yep.
Otherwise, let's get right into it, man.
And even more so than that, you'll notice, and I'll put up the link in our description for the video itself, is that the Swing Podcast is actually going to be hosting the NBA Bracket Challenge. So as you know, the NBA.com Bracket Challenge itself gives you the opportunity to be able to win up to $1 million for having the correct bracket. Obviously, that thing's often a lot of a pipe dream, because it's not only who wins, but how many games they win in. And the smallest thing can go ahead and bust the bracket. But within the Swing Podcast itself, we're going to have our own private group that is hosting a bracket challenge as well. And there are prizes to be won for those who can actually go ahead and see if they can get past that guy Owais and I, as well as all the other people that are going to be joining up on the bracket. So definitely join us on there. In fact, it's May 27th when the brackets get officially locked in. So you actually have kind of like a game or two of a fudge factor in terms of where a result could go a way you didn't expect and you can still recover from it. But like I said, I'll post the link into our description. Definitely join up on there. Sign up on the NBA.com bracket challenge and see just how well you do and what your instinct, what your gut, what your energy feels like when it actually comes down to the big games. But before we even get into individual brackets, let's take a look at what the overall situation is looking like. As you can see, this is our Western Conference and Eastern Conference all set up there, all 8 seeds. And as we said, we're starting off with the Eastern Conference first and foremost, which on the east side, on the right side there, you have Philadelphia, Washington coming up with that 1-8 matchup. You have the Brooklyn Nets and the Boston Celtics coming up with the 2-7 matchup. Then you, of course, get the middle ones, which are often the ones where people's brackets get busted, because that's where you have teams that are close to each other. The Knicks and the Atlanta Hawks coming in at that 4-5 matchup, while Milwaukee and Miami, who are actually going to be the first team to start off the playoffs today at 2 p.m., come up in a rematch of last year's Eastern Conference semifinals, where the Milwaukee Bucks had what was only described as an absolutely devastatingly disappointing performance. Got kicked out in 5 games. And let's start with that matchup, because let's go with the games as they're going to be going on. Miami and Milwaukee. Now, to me, this is going to be probably the most exciting series on the Eastern Conference front as far as the first round is concerned, mostly because of all the narratives that are there coming into it. Look, the fact of the matter is Miami is a better team than what the 6th seed is otherwise proving to them, and they're showing that in that second half of the season when they finally got their health back, because as you'll recall, for a long time, they were looking at the outside, looking in as far as the playoffs were concerned, had just absolutely been ravaged by injuries, by COVID protocols, by a number of things that had just stopped them from getting their momentum and their rhythm the way that we've seen. Obviously, last year had I guess you can call it a Cinderella story to be able to make it all the way to the NBA Finals. Not many viewers would have predicted that. And Jimmy Butler, who himself had a bit of a rough start this season as far as injuries, as far as COVID protocol is concerned, really turned it around in that second half of the season, nearly averaging a triple-double for the Miami Heat as he led them to big victory after big victory. So I'll talk to you here, that guy Owais. Are the Milwaukee Bucks now, with the changes that they made over the offseason, with everything that they have done to try and put themselves into a position to finally do justice to the talent that they've had, is this finally the year that they can make some real noise? And are they going to be good enough to get past this Miami Heat and get that monkey off their backs?
See, that's a really tough question. Because this series is going to be very unpredictable. To me, I'm like, this series can go any way. Do I think they have the edge? Surprisingly, yes. I do think the Milwaukee Bucks will take this series. It'll probably be stretched out to 7 games. And why do I think that? Well, if you recall, last year, a lot of it came down to forcing Giannis to take his shots from as far away from the basket. And another thing was, Miami plays this incredible zone defense that makes it really, really tough for a lot of teams. And it was working wonders against Milwaukee. So what's different now? You've got guys who know how to break the zone and are elite defenders, right? You had Drew Holiday. And, you might say, like, how is one person going to make the entire difference? Well, it's not just one person. I think of it like this. Milwaukee has grown from last year's series, right? They've grown during the course of the season. Even their play style to some degree is a little bit different than what we were used to seeing, right? And so having a guy like Drew is going to break down the game a lot differently. And so you have shooters now. And Giannis is more comfortable taking that 3 too. So if they give that open to him, if he lands like, let's say 30% of them, that's still 30% of threes in a close game. You know what I mean? So Drew's definitely going to break the zone down pretty well, I feel like. You have Chris Middleton, who does Chris Middleton things a lot of the time. I know in the playoffs sometimes he's a little bit on and off, but hopefully he figures it out. But Giannis, you can expect him to do what Giannis does. Hopefully we don't get playoff Giannis where he kind of chokes sometimes. But Drew's going to make the difference. That's just how I feel. Miami is just a fantastic team. But again, like, it could go any way. So this one, if you ask me, like, if I'm completely certain, like, Milwaukee's going to win, no, I'm not.
Fair. And look, it could very well go into a deeper series than you might have otherwise expected, just given the overall history that is there between the squads. I actually have a little bit of a different take on it. I think this is going to be a close series game-wise, but I think Milwaukee has gotten it together enough, and they have enough, as you said, experience and tenacity at this point to be able to do that. Last year, they had a 5-game series against the Miami Heat, and I actually think this is going to be a 5-game series as well.
Oh, wow.
Other way around. I believe Milwaukee is going to take this one 4-1 to get themselves really off the ground running. As we said, the difficulty with all of this is because there is a monster waiting in the East that just kind of throws an absolute wrench into everything else as far as potential matchups are concerned. But to me, the Milwaukee Bucks are the second best team in the Eastern Conference after just the talent juggernaut that is the Brooklyn Nets. And it's because they made those little moves and they made themselves play in a style that is more conducive to them having more half-court success. And a lot of that has come down to, as you said, Drew coming in there. But more so than that, it's just the fact of the matter that there is just more trust being put into a lot of, especially these side players that they've got really going up now. Dante DiVincenzo, Pat Connaughton, all these guys have become really key pieces to what the Milwaukee Bucks are looking to do. And when you get down to it, it just gets to the point that Mike Budenholzer, who was absolutely just shredded last year for his minutes rotation, for his pretty much like unwillingness to play Giannis like deeper minutes than he was otherwise hoping to do. I don't know. It made no sense at all. Giannis is playing like mid-30s as far as his minutes were concerned last year in the playoffs when they're losing. And it's just like, what are you doing here? We've seen a lot less of that this year. Mike Budenholzer is far more willing to go ahead and take those deeper minutes, take those longer units in terms of actual stretches going into deeper into the first, getting them in earlier into the second, because they don't want to lose that momentum. And that's where they've had this trouble. But they've bolstered their bench unit. I think they've got more than enough now talent to be able to deal with the fact that when Giannis inevitably has to go out and sit, that the Milwaukee Bucks will be able to go ahead and make sure that their performance does not drop off precipitously and really screw them over. So to me, this is an important series for Milwaukee to not only reestablish their relevancy, to essentially make Giannis feel good about the fact that, remember, he re-signed this year. There was so much outside noise about him going elsewhere, him moving around, but he stuck there. He pledged his loyalty to the Milwaukee Bucks franchise, and he himself has been awesome this year. And it really just comes down to whether the rest of the guys can go ahead and stick up for him and get him past this little wrench that has been there. And I think he's got it. So I got the Bucks in 5. I know you said the Bucks in 7. We're going to find out. Kick off.
I had Bucks in 6.
Bucks in 6. Okay. All right. So 5-6 games, but we both have a consensus agreement that the Milwaukee Bucks are going to be the team to go ahead and move on in that first round matchup. Next, we get the Brooklyn versus the Boston Celtics.
All right.
That's coming up against there. And, you know, as much as this sounds, at least on paper, to be an interesting matchup, one, because of the storylines that are surrounding it. Remember, Kyrie left from the Boston Celtics in less than happy circumstances. Let's say the Boston Celtics fans are more than happy to see him gone after all the scenarios that are coming through and of all the crap that went down as far as team chemistry, all the stuff. Yet they still were able to pull it together enough to make it to the conference finals last year in what was a pretty solid year for them. Jason Tatum took that next step into superstardom, has really solidified himself this year as one of the smoothest operators in the game today.
Yes, sir.
The Boston Celtics themselves have been just incredibly hot and cold this entire season. And now they've lost Jaylen Brown. He's not going to be there for this entire postseason run. And it really just comes down to, can Marcus Smart do what he did last year to really try and bring that little bit of extra energy? Because they're going to be coming up against a Brooklyn Nets team that is the ultimate just championship or bust scenario. You've got 3 guys there that are now back in as far as health is concerned, ready to go. And, you know, there's a lot to prove for them. They need to go ahead and have this happen for them. What do you say about the Brooklyn and Boston matchup?
Well, we already talked about how much of a cheat code Brooklyn is in general. And you have the experience of, like, you know, Kevin Durant to kind of lead, and Kyrie as well, to kind of show these guys what it takes to get to that, you know, final level, to win it all. And so that'll be very, very important. But you got like hard-nosed, like a lot of like really, really hard-working guys on Brooklyn, and everybody seems to be putting egos aside and just, you know, playing as a team. And that's a beautiful thing to see. So really excited to just see what Brooklyn does in the playoffs, because there's, you know, if there's someone who has the most expectations this season, and it's easily the Brooklyn Nets. So where does Boston play into all of this? Now, a lot of people, you know, missing Jaylen Brown is actually huge in this series. If they had Jaylen, I think that this series could really be dangerous for Brooklyn. I think for a first round, this was probably the worst opponent that Brooklyn could be matched up with. Now, why do I say that? They had Tristan Thompson. A lot of people are gonna say I'm stupid or something like that, but guess what? Tristan Thompson is extremely good at what he does. He's an agitator. He's really good on the glass, and he's also extremely good, at blocking guys, getting rebounds on the defensive end, and these are things that can be very, very clutch. But ultimately, the coaching on Boston is we've already talked about how great Brad Stevens is as a coach, and no matter what, I will never count out the Boston Celtics. And so really, I think this is a deep series. I think 6 or 7 games, it's going to go to Brooklyn, but each game I feel is going to be extremely close. Like it's going to be like neck and neck the entire time. The Brooklyn Nets, all they really have to do is contain Tatum. If they can do that, I think they might even win earlier. But on the defensive end, Boston's a good team. Don't forget this ever. So I just want to see how these superstars on Brooklyn adjust to how well Boston plays team defense. But yeah, ultimately Brooklyn in 6 or 7 games.
Oh, 6 or 7. Okay. Yeah. Well, you've got the series going a good bit deeper than mine. I'm still convinced that this is going to be a sweep for the Brooklyn Nets, and it's just a matter of them getting that rhythm going early. But what ends up often happening in these scenarios is that the first game it ends up being like a banana peel one where they just happen to slip up while they're getting all of their engines up and running. So I could see this potentially going up to a 5-game series, but it just comes down to the fact that apart from Boston obviously dealing with the injury of Jaylen Brown and everything else that goes there, they just have really struggled to get any sort of offense put together, even when Jaylen was there. It's just been a scenario in which Kemba has had a really off season as far as his shot creation is concerned. Obviously, Jason Tatum has played really well, but outside of that, Marcus Smart, after his big playoff run last year, has kind of regressed to the mean as far as his shooting is concerned and as far as his reliability as an offensive option has been concerned, even though he's gotten better and better as a passer. So it's kind of been this off thing where they have a lot of great ball movement, but that final execution has been really lacking as far as Boston's concerned. So it kind of comes down in many ways to the same scenario that Steph Curry has been dealing with as far as the Golden State Warriors is concerned, where you were really, really kind of keying in on preventing Jason Tatum to get to the spots that he would like to go to. And then it just comes down to living with the fact that if a Peyton Pritchard or a Fournier, these guys are going to be doing well enough consistently to be able to beat you, then you just tip your hat to them. But it just hasn't been the case up until now. And you just mentioned Fournier, another acquisition at the trade deadline that really hasn't worked out because of injuries pretty much as soon as he came in. And then it just takes time to get yourself acclimated and kind of making your game fit in with what Boston does. And on Orlando, he had a lot more usage, a lot more ball handling capability, and a lot more ball handling responsibility given to him. Here, he's pretty much off ball only, and he's been asked to just run a screen over screen and catch and shoot, which he's all right at. It's not that he's a bad guy at that, but that was more of his role back when he was on Denver. And he's kind of shifted his game from that. So it's just been a bit of an odd fit thus far. So, I mean, maybe they can get it to work by the time next season comes around, but as far as this playoff run is concerned, it's going to be really tough for them to go ahead and deal with a Brooklyn Nets team that has been all systems go as far as offense is concerned, regardless of who's there and who's not. But when they're fully healthy and fully on, then that team just reaches a level that's just absolutely out of this world.
Yeah.
James Harden as point guard has shown himself to be the most dangerous offensive weapon that you're seeing in the league today. And it's just fun to watch. It's fun to watch, and I think this Brooklyn team is going to really be looking to get themselves going, get their engines going, and get themselves ready for what should be an incredibly deep and successful playoff run for them. So I'm picking Brooklyn in 4 with a chance of it going to 5, but we'll stick with the sweep for now. With that in mind, we get to go ahead and move on to the third matchup of this first day, which – again, we're doing what is ending up happening as far as the matchups are concerned is that you're going to have two Western Conference teams also playing tonight. But let's focus first and foremost on the 4-5 matchup as far as the Eastern Conference is concerned. And that is one where there is 100% a lot of uncertainty. And this is probably not the seeding spots that you would have expected both of these franchises to be at. Maybe Atlanta would have been thinking that they could get a top 4 seed depending on how things went as far as their health was concerned. But obviously they dealt with their own adversities all the way through. But the New York Knicks, which have been the absolute surprise of the season, the pleasant surprise, the best defensive squad in the season, led by the likely most improved player winner in Julius Randle. They've just had an absolutely amazing season. No two ways about it. It has been a great year for New York Knicks and their fans, and they'll be hoping that their journey is not ending here, but they come up against the Atlanta Hawks in a team that is just so incredibly deep, so incredibly talented, but do they have enough put all together to get themselves to that next level and past this first-round matchup?
Mm-hmm. You know, it's great points there. I really don't. We didn't necessarily see Atlanta come here up until like that second half when everybody got healthy and stuff like that. And New York, I was a big believer. As soon as we saw the way they were playing and how effective they were on defense, I was like, this team is going to stay high. I don't understand why people think that, they're going to be playing in for the playoffs, if anything. No, it made no sense. But for this particular series, I give New York the edge. And it just comes down to how good they play defense. And I think that might be the ultimate reason as to why they end up beating Atlanta. Like if you can shut down guys like, Collins, you can shut down guys like Gallo or like Bogdanovich and Trey. I mean, like, of course you got to pick your poison. Like who are you going to shut down the most, right? And it's likely going to be Trey, just the way he plays, and maybe Collins, and let the other guys do their work. But that length is insane. Getting inside is not easy on New York, right? They're really, really great, glass defending team. So, Noel has been fantastic this season. I think it's just going to come down to defense. And to be quite honest, I think the Knicks take it in 6, maybe 5 or 6.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that's that guy Oasis pick. He's going with the upstart Knicks to really double down on their incredible season. The Knickerbockers. I'm sure there's a lot of Swing Podcast listeners, maybe those related to our boy Kev, who will be very happy to hear that the New York Knicks are going to go ahead and move on. On the other hand, I've also got this as a 6-game series, but one that the Atlanta Hawks will take. In many ways related to exactly what you were saying, just naming off the amount of offensive weapons that this Atlanta squad has. And look, this is not the spot that I was thinking Atlanta would be. I was actually having them higher earlier on in the season. I believe I picked them as a 3rd seed to be able to go ahead and get in. So they have slightly underperformed. Some of it had to do with the fact that they had those injuries. Some of them had to do with the fact that it's just been that kind of a season where teams have just not been able to get their groove going. But the big positive that has come up for the Atlanta Hawks in the second half of the season has been Bogdanovich really going ahead and taking that next step as essentially the secondary ball handler for them, taking a lot of pressure off of Trae Young, taking a lot of pressure off of that Atlanta offense, which would otherwise get stagnant. But he comes in and pretty much provides that extra burst with all of it. And
serves
that burst. Yeah, he serves, he dives. Remember, Bogdan was on this team almost as a fluke. He was supposed to be on
we thought we were going to Milwaukee, man.
Yeah, that entire thing was done. But obviously, other scenarios, other external factors came into play, and what we see now is what we actually have. So Bogdanovich goes ahead and joins on the Atlanta Hawks, where he jumps in right away as a key contributor. Initially off the bench, now they like to kind of have him in like this as needed role, but essentially his usage rate has been spiking in the last 2-3 months, and it's been to the boon of the Atlanta Hawks. And that is really kind of been my question throughout the season for the Atlanta Hawks? Are there too many chefs in the kitchen? Are there too many cooks that are going to go ahead and knead the ball in their hand to be effective? But as we've seen, it's kind of been Trae Young, Bogdan Bogdanovic that are taking the vast majority of the ball handling responsibilities while allowing players like Gallinari, John Collins, all these guys to kind of roam free and become a lot more dynamic in their off-ball offense, especially John Collins, who tons of sick lobs this entire season, and he's really worked a lot on his off-ball running, off-ball screens. He's really become a dangerous cutter. So there's just so many wrinkles now to this offense, and as much as defense wins championships, offense in its greatness will often beat great defense as well. So it's just one of those things where we will have to see how it goes. Of course, this is Trae Young's first trip to the postseason as well. He has lots of expectations coming in, hoping that he can also capitalize on being one of the best young guards in the league today. So as much as we're excited to see a Devin Booker, a Ja Morant, these guys go ahead and get their first postseason runs as well, Trae Young is also going to be really looking to put his mark on there, and I believe he starts it here with a solid 6-game victory against the Knicks.
6 games, okay.
6 games. Well, we'll have to see how that goes, but that is going to be one of the key matchups to watch in the Eastern Conference. And then finally, we go ahead and wrap up the East with the Philadelphia 76ers taking on TK's Washington Wizards as they...
Do we need to talk about this? Can we just say, can we bring a broom out and just say sweep already? Like, can we do that?
I mean, that would probably be a scenario that Philly would definitely be looking at. I think just one of those games where you'll have either Westbrook or Beal happen to go off. It's just when you have that kind of top-end talent, I'm giving them one game. I've got Philly.
One game? Okay, we'll give them one. Charity game, you know, Philly, brotherly love, you know. Here you go, camaraderie. Give them a game.
There you go.
This is in by far and large two very vastly different teams in terms of talent. You just have 2 guys on Washington who have been carrying the crap out of this team and have kind of just led them to the situation that they're in right now. Philadelphia has been dominant all season. You know, a lot of people have been talking about could this be the season that they finally, make it to the finals or get over that hump of the second round or whatever else. The thing with here is Embiid was playing MVP numbers early in the season, right? And we're expecting much the same. Ben Simmons, as we mentioned, might be like, I don't know if he's considered a defensive player of the year this year. I don't think
he's the nominee this front running candidate at the moment.
Candidate. There you go. So Ben Simmons has been absolutely killing it on the defensive end. And you have guys like Danny Green. Don't forget, a lot of people, I hate it when people forget this. Danny Green is a golden boy. 2019 came to the Raptors and absolutely just changed their outlook based off of their defense. And Kawhi did everything else on the offensive end, right? So then you have him come into the Lakers and very much the same. Like, people forget this, man. Whenever he's on the floor, he's a positive. He's making things happen, he's stopping people, and very much the same. You put Danny Green in on a Philly team who, look, Ben Simmons is now automatically a candidate for Defensive Player of the Year. Are you kidding me? You think that's just because of Ben Simmons? No, sir. That's because Danny Green leads these boys with his defensive prowess, IQ. Danny, I hope you're watching this because I'm a big fan. And so expect this to be a sweep, man. Expect this to be a sweep. I can't say it any other way. Like, I don't see, even if Westbrook has a great game or Beal has a great game, I don't see who are they going to stop. Like, who's going to stop Embiid? Himself. The only way it works is if Embiid stops himself. Okay, but not much more to say about that. Congrats to the Wizards to make it, though, like a beautiful story this year.
Yep, sure. And the other wrinkle in all this is that Beal is also less than 100% as far as his hamstring is concerned. So that's also going to be yet another card stacked against the Washington Wizards' chances in this series. So don't expect this to be much of a matchup. Maybe it goes to 5. Maybe it stays as a sweep. But either way, the Philadelphia 76ers are going to be moving on, barring something absolutely miraculous coming in from the other side. So speaking of the other side, though, this is where we go ahead and now move to the West side. The Western Conference playoffs are finally together finally here and finally set up. And there are so many chances and so many insane matchups over here that obviously we play in the East. Toronto Raptors have played in the East. They're not here this year. We like to focus on that side of things. But this year's Western Conference is absolutely just an ultimate gauntlet as far as
every series, man. Every freaking series, you're like, okay, I actually can't legitimately convince myself to say that this team's going to go through, right? And it seems like every series is going to be like a 7-game series. Seriously, like it's going to be that deep. I mean, let's just look at that. You've got right off the bat, you have friggin' Utah against Memphis. Now, game of bigs, right? Like, imagine Memphis has Jonas Valanciunas, who we mentioned is someone who's extreme, like very unguardable against most teams. But now you have Rudy Gobert, right? What's his nickname? The
Stifle Tower, man. The Stifle Tower.
The Stifle. There you go. Like, if anyone, there you go. You got the answer right there. And then, Utah just played fantastic basketball this season. I don't think anyone expected them to be the first seed this year. Seriously, I don't think anyone. Stop. You did not expect them to be the first seed.
Put it back. Roll it back.
You did not.
Roll it back.
Stop.
Roll it back.
What? Like maybe mid-season you probably said something about them being first seed? Or did you predict this preseason?
I go back to what I had Utah as far as wins are concerned, and I said this team is going to be absolutely on fire the most. Because look, the top teams otherwise, the Lakers, the Clippers, all these guys, they're not really focused on winning big in the regular season, all that. The Utah Jazz are a team that not only had so much coming through for them after that just ridiculous series against the Denver Nuggets, where it could have gone either way, second or the other, probably the series of the playoffs last year. And people just want more of that. And the Utah Jazz have gotten that and that much better this year. As you'll see, as far as my bracket is concerned, I've actually got the Utah Jazz going all the way to the finals.
Seriously.
And it's because of how incredibly well played, well coached, and frankly, how well they have finally got Mike Conley fully integrated into the entire offensive structure and actually got him back to what made him so incredibly effective in Memphis, giving him those opportunities in which he gets more on-ball things, as Donovan Mitchell has gotten the opportunity to become more effective off-ball. They've kind of taken that hey, Donovan Mitchell, Spida, has great capabilities as a ball handler, and of course that's going to be things that we use down the clutch, down the stretch. But when we want our offense kind of humming in cruise control, you want Mike Conley as your primary offensive initiator because, one, he's done that for years. He's incredibly good at it, incredibly underrated as an offensive point guard in general. On Memphis for years, he was just absolutely off the chains. And they kind of went the other way last year where Conley was asked to be pretty much off ball, which is not his game. He's not nearly as good at that. So that was just a matter of recognizing the personnel that you have and making those tweaks to get better. And they've done that. They are the number one three-point shooting team in the league, most three-point made per game, fourth in three-point percentage, while also being number 3 in defensive ranking. And it's just been repeatable, solid basketball that's also been super fun to watch all the way through. And the other X factor that's come, and of course we spoke about it in our last podcast in our 6th Man of the Year pick, in Jordan Clarkson, who has just been absolutely awesome for them off the bench. It's not even that he's shooting all incredible percentages or all of that. It's just he comes in at the right time with the right energy and just has a great head on his shoulders now. He's just become so much better at reading the game. And really the big situation that comes up with any of these teams is that usually your 5 starters are great. Your main guys are there. You've got it all set up. But then the problem becomes, who are those support guys to help ensure that there's no drop-off? And that's what the Utah Jazz have gotten now, not only in Jordan Clarkson, but in a number of these little side players that they have, George Niang, all these people that have really, really stepped up as far as being that solid support player that they've needed to be able to kind of bring the whole team together. And so to me, this Utah Jazz team, the only reason I didn't go all the way nuts and be like, they're going to win the ship is because Brooklyn is absolutely a different beast. That's going to be something that, in my mind, is too much to overcome. But there is, to me and in my mind, no obvious weakness to the Utah Jazz's squad. And to beat them, you're just going to have to straight up have a series of games in which you outplay them and outthink them.
I mean, you bust out the stats. It's really hard to argue that, right? But, I mean, I'm going to come down to mentality. Like, in this series, of course, there's no shot. I don't think Memphis has a chance against Utah. But I think against the other teams, it comes down to experience and just, mentality. So do I think that they go all the way? Absolutely not. I don't think they have a shot. Okay. I think they're a second-round exit at most. But that doesn't mean that, again, this is the playoffs. Anything can happen. Anything can happen. And so, and especially like during the course of this, like a team that makes it to the top, is a top team, doesn't necessarily translate as them going straight to the finals or something like that, right? That just never happened. It just comes down to your players, and how you play. Like, the Lakers just had the 1-2 punch, and the side pieces just figured it out last season, right? And they have the experience. They have that experience. But anyway, there's not much to say about that. You have what, Utah in 6?
Utah in 5 is what I had on there. Yep. I was saying Memphis just because they're going to have all of this confidence coming through after obviously getting in as a 9 seed. I do feel that they'll pull off one game. One, just because, Ja deserves to have his playoff moment at this right time.
That's not how the playoffs work. The deserve bullshit. That's not how it works.
As in, he's going to have a great series, and I think that great series is going to translate to one win for the Memphis Grizzlies. But the Utah Jazz are just too big, too strong, and frankly, too talented to go ahead and have any sort of real trouble against the Memphis Grizzlies.
There you go.
So that moves us on probably to the only, in my mind, easy pick out of the matchups that have come so far. So we've got 3 more happening in the Western Conference, all of which are just insane for reasons, whether it be from a seeding perspective, whether it be from a historical perspective, or whether it just be because a team that should be higher is seeded a lot lower than otherwise would have been expected. But let's start with a Clippers and Mavericks series, which is a rematch of that insane bubble series that they had last year. Obviously, at that one, the Clippers won in 6 games after what was a breakout kind of superstar making series for Luka Doncic. Obviously had that crazy game winner. He had the crazy game winner in which they pretty much beat them on their own. Because remember, last playoff series, no Kristaps Porzingis, had a number of other scenarios as well in which they were just less healthy than they would have otherwise wanted to be going into that. And they really gave the Clippers a run for their money. It was I could have seen that series go the other way if they were fully healthy, and that is what they are this time around. That being said, the Clippers themselves have also made market improvements to their team this season, not only from just internal growth, people playing better this year than they were last year, but in bringing back a Nicholas Batum, who has had a kind of a renaissance season as far as his game is concerned, to get himself back as that Swiss Army knife that he'd always been. Marcus Morris has played really, really well. And Zubac has been kind of this underrated big who's just been one of the most dominant rebounders in the per minutes that he's gone ahead and played. So the Clippers are really looking to not only get past this matchup in a scenario where they're hoping they can do it better than they did last year, but they're also now hoping to finally get past that second round demon that has plagued their entire franchise for its entire history. Clippers have never made it past the second round. Will they do it this year? I don't know. But what I do know, or at least what I do hope, is that the Clippers are going to be good enough to go ahead and win this matchup. It will be a 6-game series in my mind, just because a healthier Dallas Mavericks is a peskier team. Luka just keeps getting better. Porzingis needs some playoff moments behind him with all the injuries he's had. So I'm saying Clippers in 6, but this is going to be a fun one to watch.
Absolutely. I mean, it comes down to like Mike Breen's call last year when Doncic hit that game. Went, bang! He said it twice. He was like, bang! Yeah, Luka. So anyway, it's gonna be a great series. I'm excited to see what Porzingis does this series. But I honestly have I have the Clippers in 5. I just think they're way too stacked this season. And the big change that they had this season wasn't necessarily the intel, like the roster or anything like that. Yeah, they added a lot of great pieces, but more so the play of Paul George. And it comes down to what I said last season as well. It's like, they have Paul George as a catch and shoot guy. When the hell has he been a catch and shoot guy in his career? Why has he struggled so much in the playoffs over the course of the stint with OKC and this and that? It's because he wasn't the premier ball handler. He put him as a ball handler, and he changes the game entirely. And credit to Tyronn Lue for seeing that and giving him that opportunity. Doc Rivers didn't give that to him. He's like, you're going to continue playing catch and shoot. And it just didn't make any sense. And look at the numbers he's putting up this season. Look how efficiently he's playing this season. And don't forget, this guy is a sound defender as well. So Paul George is going to be the Achilles heel of the Clippers. If he plays extremely well, this team, I don't think anyone's stopping them from making the finals. Okay? But if he plays bad, the playoff bishab that we've seen over the years, pandemic P, whatever, like playoff poo-poo for all I care. If we don't see that this season, it's gonna be very tough for a lot of teams. So I also have Clippers winning, and I have them winning in 5.
Okay.
And that's just how I feel about that. Now we're gonna move on to the next series, and this is actually a pretty interesting series. We have Denver and Portland. Now, we don't have the likes of Jamal Murray, an absolute legend in the making. Amazing playoff series last year. The way that Denver had that run is just off of the backs of Jokic and Jamal Murray's extreme success. They don't have him anymore. But who do they have? They have Michael Porter Jr. They added Aaron Gordon, and they have a few other pieces that still make them an extremely good team. Jokic playing MVP level, had an MVP level season. So now they're facing Portland. Portland, I actually feel like, are the most underrated team in the entire league. And my cat over here agrees. He's yelling out to me saying, Owais, let the world know that Portland's going to take this series against Denver. And that's how I feel. I really feel as though Portland's taking this series, and they're taking it in 7. It's going to be a really tight series, but Portland's taking it in 7. You're welcome, Portland, for giving you guys Norman Powell. That's why you're going to win.
Wow. Well, playoff Powell, the other playoff P, is definitely going to be making his appearance for the Portland Trailblazers. Huge upgrade for them. Huge addition for what they were looking to do in the short term to make a run that is worthy of kind of the level that they've overall been looking to play. Mm-hmm. My problem with Portland is what has been for many years with them, and that's just plain and simple their absolutely paper-thin defense. And it's just consistently been one of the worst defenses in the league, and it's continued to be the same case this year. On the other hand, the Denver Nuggets, even though the Jamal Murray loss to me caps off their upside, because I had when I was putting up the initial, between the Denver Nuggets and the Utah Jazz, I was like, no, that's the squads that are going to be competing for the finals this year, not the ones that everyone else has, just because of how well made and how well they play together. And they've got that experience, especially as far as the Denver Nuggets are concerned, being pretty much back to the wall again and again in series after series in which they just go ahead and come back from that. In fact, they seem to play at their best when they're pushed up absolutely against it. So for me to say that if this goes to a 7-game series, I actually think that helps Denver just because of how they've gone ahead and had those scenarios. That being said, you do have to remember that this Denver-Portland matchup has been something that's been an exciting one for a playoffs in the past as well. Remember, 2019, this was also a 7-game series in the second round where Denver essentially shot themselves in the foot in that fourth quarter, where Damian Lillard did absolutely nothing all game. CJ McCollum was the one who was having a solid game there, but really it was Denver beating themselves to go ahead and get kicked out. And that was what they considered one of their biggest disappointments. They definitely saw themselves as at least a conference finalist in that year, obviously did it last year. And I feel that is their hopes this year as well. At the very least, even with the Jamal Murray injury, they'll be thinking that, hey, look, obviously that is a huge loss, but they have so much depth on that squad that they aren't losing a huge amount as far as pure offensive production is concerned. Of course, that Jamal Murray X factor, the capability to create something out of nothing, in those kind of scenarios, they are definitely going to struggle more. But in Michael Porter Jr. taking huge strides this season as far as the offensive player is concerned, the always respectable, always dependable Will Barton, who is able to come in and just be very much like what Jordan Clarkson's doing for the Utah Jazz. This guy who can just come in and just create havoc because of the fact that he's such a good ball handler and such a good one-on-one scorer that in those situations where you need a bucket, he's always been a reliable guy for them. And then, as you said, the Aaron Gordon effect is something that we're really going to get to see now as far as the playoffs are concerned. He has, to this day, as far as the Denver Nuggets side has been concerned, not been a great factor for them since he's come in. He's dealt with a couple of injuries since he's gotten there. His role is still a little bit off. He's become a bit more of a outside shooter, which has been a kind of part of development for him, not been the most consistent out there. But now, in this scenario where the rotations are going to shorten, where you're going to require more out of these top guys, look, Millsap doesn't play nearly as many minutes for them anymore. He's going to be doing more kind of emergency stuff and more kind of key minutes here. But it's going to really be important for Aaron Gordon to step up and be that third, fourth guy that they're going to need to get some consistent points out of. They're going to need 15 points a game out of him. So
100%.
For him to do that, that's going to be incredibly key for them. And I think he's got it. I think he's going to be able to do that. And I believe that this kind of a matchup where the Portland Trailblazers aren't the greatest at containing guys at the wing, other than Robert Covington, their wing defense is actually pretty mediocre. So it all comes down to whether they're going to be able to get that groove going. And the Jokic-Nurkic matchup is always a thing to watch. You got to remember, both those guys were on the Denver Nuggets. Nurkic had the job. Like he was supposed to be the center of the future, and then Jokic would be their power forward / kind of floating guy. And they were supposed to be this insane two-man power unit at the front, which obviously did not work out. But Nurkic has found himself a great home in Portland, has been absolutely awesome, was ridiculous in the playoffs last year, but this season had missed a lot of time with his injury as well, and then finally has now got back to something. So it's going to be an interesting matchup. I have it as a 6-game series. I do think Denver goes ahead and pulls it off, but I could very well see this going to 7. And even if that happens, I still got Denver winning, but this is definitely going to be one of these series to watch, and I'm sure Zuko agrees.
Zuko, what do you think? What do you think, buddy? He doesn't know. He's speechless right now. Everything you said, like, I think Aaron Gordon is going to be the X factor in this series. Apart, like, for him, for his confidence and everything like that, I think it's extremely important for him to, continue doing those cuts that we talked about. It's literally impossible. Like, even some of the best wing defending teams are going to struggle with Aaron Gordon if he plays that kind of game and that kind of role for them. And, we've seen Spurs a bit early when Aaron Gordon made his way to Denver and how effective that was. Jokic was finding him left, right, and center. Unguardable. If they can continue doing that for him, and especially, as you mentioned, with Millsap kind of playing a lesser role, there's a lot of success that I see in the future for Aaron Gordon. However, I will, again, for me, something tells me Portland's just going to come through and win it in 7.
Fair. Yeah, this is definitely a series where I wasn't smashed down on the fact that I think Denver is going to go ahead and do it. I do believe in them still. I believe they'll get past this matchup, but it could very well go the other way. And speaking of a series that could go a way that just seems implausible, but yet seems like it should make logical sense, the Phoenix Suns in the 2nd seed coming up against probably the matchup that they were hoping to avoid having. this absolutely incredible season, coming through from a lottery team to an 8-game win streak in the bubble, just missing out on the playoffs, to getting Chris Paul and just absolutely turning themselves around this year to come in with a 50-win season, jumping into the 2nd seed of the West. All of it sounds rosy, but now you're up against LeBron James and his Los Angeles Lakers at the 7th seed.
LeBron James.
Just wild. It's so sad because for me, the Phoenix Suns do not deserve to have to deal with something like this early. But you know what? As they say, to be the best, you got to beat the best. And as much as I would love for the Phoenix Suns to go ahead and pull something off, I want to see more Book. I want to see more Chris Paul. And I really want to see this team do something. It is going to be one hell of an uphill battle. I've got the Lakers in 6. What do you say, that guy, Owais?
I had Lakers in 5, I think. Love Phoenix and love their makeup, and I think they have a fantastic team. And I hope they give us like pure entertainment when it comes to D-Book in the playoffs and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I like that AD-Ayton matchup. I want to see what happens there. But one advice that I'll give to Phoenix, if you guys are watching this, just don't poke LeBron in the eye, quote unquote. Don't make him see 3 nets because he'll score in every single one of them. It's kind of annoying. And then he'll cry about it and whatever else. And you're going to have this old man continue resting and get his boys' legs rested and all that garbage. And that's the thing you get with LeBron, right? Clutch after clutch with granny tendencies of, oh, my pain, I pain everyone.
Wow.
That's LeBron in a nutshell. So,
so basically he's incredible and you just feel the pain because he's now hit 97 game-tying or go-ahead buckets, second only to Kobe.
No, it's amazing. Don't get me wrong. That was a freaking fantastic clutch shot. I'm pissed at it because of how amazing it was. But again, it just all the theatrics that come with LeBron absolutely destroy any respect I have for his legacy outside. So I have to literally forget that part of his game for me to actually enjoy watching him. So I'll stick to just watching LeBron highlights versus watching LeBron games, if that makes any sense to you. The Lakers, we said they're an upgraded team from last year even. And they don't have Rondo this year, so they have Schroeder, who I don't know, inconsistent to some degree, but when you have LeBron playing and you have AD playing, you have a shot to make the finals every single year. That's a punch that is just incredible. And we've seen it over and over again. You've seen how clutch AD gets when he needs to. In the 4th quarter, he took over, right? And then LeBron did too. So, I mean, who's going to contain these guys? I think that Ayton and AD matchup, maybe AD might be stopped 1 or 2 games, but there's no one in this league that can stop LeBron James. Not a single person. So when he turns it on, he turns it on. That's it. Phoenix is done in 5 games. And that's how I feel about that. And ladies and gentlemen, that's our prediction for the playoff series. Again, like you mentioned, we have this group set up on NBA.com. We want to see what you guys pick and kind of compare each other. Remember, I think I'm right. I really do. HK,
everyone does when they start, and then brackets get busted.
But we want to see what you guys think. And I think it'd be a great way for us to kind of have little discussions here and stuff like that. And maybe we can have another episode dedicated to just, us talking with the fans and, talking about our experiences with the playoffs, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And just to have you guys explain some of these picks. That would be really fun. But yeah, you've seen it here. And then I guess we'll continue doing podcasts on the Tuesdays.
Yes,
we'll probably talk about some of the games that were going on. And man, we're excited for the playoffs. We're so freaking excited. This is gonna be I don't know about you, but do you feel like this is like the most competitive seedings you've ever seen in the history of the NBA?
Okay, well, that'll be wait to be seen as you actually go ahead and go through. But especially on the Western Conference, like you said, there's just so many matchups that you could kind of convince yourself to go either way and just feel just as confident going there. So that's why it's going to be not played on paper. It's going to be played on the court, and we're going to see exactly how these things play out. But we are less than an hour away from the first tip-off there. 2 p.m. Eastern time, we're going to get to see Milwaukee and Miami break the ice on the 2021 NBA playoffs. As always, the Swing Podcast is there for you to get all the latest news, to get all the latest updates, and to get all the hottest takes about exactly what's going on throughout the NBA world. Make sure to follow us on our YouTube channel. Subscribe and like if you haven't already. It definitely helps us keep growing. And engage with us on Instagram at The Swing Podcast, where you can always go ahead and catch us with live reactions post-game with that guy Owais and I really getting into the emotions of exactly what is transpiring in the NBA world. Yes, sir. But until then, we are signing off for today. We will see you on Tuesday. As always, with The Swing, this is that guy Owais, this is HK, and that is Zuko also signing off for us. And until then, we will see you at the next one. Enjoy the playoffs and take care.
Take care.
Simmons.